If we look back to the early days, the very early days when you were growing up in Flint, Michigan, like so many of your contemporaries, it was Sunday night with the family around the TV set watching Ed Sullivan, and that's where you first get introduced to the Beatles.
Oh, yes. And I watched my brothers and sisters as we are watching the reaction of the audience, and the Beatles are playing. And I saw the long hair and I said, that's got to be it. I got to grow my hair out. And from that moment, Tim, I was growing my hair out, and I would slick it back with some grease to go to school. And then as soon as I got home, I'd put some Prel shampoo on and wash the grease out and let it down.
You had quite a musical family, didn't you?
Yes, as a matter of fact. My mother was a great singer. My dad was a guitarist and saxophonist. And my Grandpa Cotton, Uncle Woody, Uncle Brian all played instruments. They played violin and they played guitar and banjo. And every Sunday there was a jam session either at my mother's house or my Aunt Dorothy's house. And we would all get together and play music. But the little kids, us, were just taken by the musicians and taken by this music. And I remember looking up at them. They were big back then. I mean, I was looking up at them and I'm thinking, wow, these guys, they just really got it. And the women, when the women were singing, it was like nothing you'd ever heard before. It was the greatest harmonies, family voices, like the Bee Gees.
You were actually developing quite an athletic career as well. I mean, it seemed like you had two great choices before the injury. Of course, you were a very good football player, and you were developing into becoming a pretty good musician as well.
Well, the football player, I loved playing football because every time I was in on a tackle, which was every time somebody was running a play, they would call my name out on the loudspeaker, and they would say who was in on the tackle. They say, that was Farner, number 66, in on the tackle. And boy, it made me pick my step up, and I was just prancing across that field. And that's really what I wanted. And when I got injured, my mother saw that was taken away from me. And she got me the 6 lessons and, rented a guitar, an acoustic guitar for me to learn guitar. And the guitar teacher, after 3 lessons, the guitar teacher had a hunting accident. It was ringneck pheasant season in Michigan, and he shot himself in the foot with a 12 gauge. So he told my mother I'd have to go up and watch the guys in the high school band that my sister hung out with. Diane knew these guys, and they were musicians, and they were trying to put a band together, and I would go watch them play, and then I would go back and learn, take my guitar and go, oh yeah, that's how they do that right there.
And you cut a really big break because you get invited by Terry Knight and the Pack, the manager, Jim Atherton, wasn't it, to come in and replace their bassist. That was a big thing out then because Terry Knight and the Pack were a known commodity. So how did you feel to get the call and to get invited in to play with this big band?
Well, they had the notoriety. They had some records. I Who Have Nothing was on the radio, and Mr. You're a Better Man Than I. And when they asked me to play, they said, can you play bass? And I said, well, I've never played bass before, but I did play a sousaphone starting in the 5th grade in the band in school. And so I had a little bit of a taste for bass. So I said, yeah, I think I could do it. I'll pick one up. And I went to the music store, and a friend of mine let me take it on payments, and I bought a Burns 4-string bass, and that was nice guitar. and easy to play. And the songs that I learned, easy songs, so a good way to start out.
They'd opened with the Stones and the Yardbirds as well. I mean, just again, another underlining of how good they were. But at what point did they realize, and you realize, that you had the voice and the personality to front a band?
Well, it wasn't until we played a few gigs, and Brewer and I were talking, the drummer Don and I were talking one night, and I said, every time Terry gets up there and sings, it's not fulfilling. It's not, he's trying to sing, and if it wasn't for us doing the backgrounds, I don't think he would sing very good at all. And Brewer agreed, and I said, we need to just fire him and go out on our own, because we both sing better than he does. And so Brewer agreed, and that's what happened.
So Grand Funk is off and running. And again, I mean, we talk about breaks and being in the right place at the right time. It's a month before the Woodstock Festival. You get an invite to play the Atlanta International Pop Festival, July 4th. Again, another big day, of course, Independence Day, 1969. How did you feel when that call came in? I think it was from the attorney's office, wasn't it? To join this bill that included Janis Joplin, the Chicago Transit Authority, Creedence, Blood, Sweat and Tears, and a fledgling young Led Zeppelin.
Yes. Well, when we knew that we were going to open this festival, we had no idea. I hadn't even heard the terminology before, Tim. It was, kind of a fantasy going, oh my God, we're going to play in front of a bunch of people, but we had no idea how vast that audience was going to be. But we were just geeked, and, 20-year-old kids busting out of the garage, coming down from Flint, Michigan. And the attorneys that were Terry Knight's attorneys were doing the legal work for this festival. So they offered them a break in their legal fees, of course, and to get their band, Grand Funk Railroad, to go on and open the show. And it worked out. It was not just luck. I think there was some divine intervention there, because just getting there and being able to set our equipment up was a major event, just because of the trip and how we rolled a U-Haul trailer down through the ditch with all of our equipment in it. And it was a fiasco getting there. And I said, something is trying to prevent us from getting there, but we got to fight. We got to push forward. And we did. And when we got there and pulled our amplifiers out of the trailer, the transformers had ripped from the chassis, and there was so much damage done to. And all the other roadies from all these other bands saw that we were in a pickle, and they came and they joined. It was a community back then, Tim, in '69. It was a community. Music was our
religion
anthem. That was our mantra, and everybody joined and soldered wires together. All these other roadies that were for the other bands, these professional bands, they were coming and helping these little guys out. It was just great to have that kind of support. And then they walk up on the stage, walk up the steps, and take a look at that audience. I went, oh my God, I have to piss so bad. And the guitar tech that I was using, Bookman, he says, you get your ass out there and rock, buddy. This is your chance.
180,000 people in that audience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite incredible. And the first song that you played on that stage on that day was?
Are You Ready?
Tell me the story about the shirt, because you'd gone out and done a little bit of shopping, and you.
Oh, yes. had this fancy paisley print, see-through paisley print shirt. It cost me $50. And back then, Tim, $50 was a lot of money. And I got out there on the stage and I'm showing off my shirt, and it came to the encore and we were doing Land of a Thousand Dances, Wilson Pickett style. And I was just sweating profusely. It was 110 degrees in the shade, and this Michigan blood was just boiling on that stage. And the shirt was restricting my movement, so I grabbed a hold of the front of that shirt and I just ripped that $50 shirt right off my back, and the audience jumped to their feet and they loved it. I said, oh my God, I got to keep that in the set.
You were actually unbilled and unpaid on that night. I mean, you got standing ovations, of course, and everybody was going completely wild. But I mean, after that, you'd have thought that somebody might have weighed in with a few dollars, but they didn't, did they? You were unpaid and unbilled.
That's right. We were unpaid for all three of the performances, but when we went on the first day, it was noon. The second day, they put us on at 7 o'clock at night, or in the afternoon. And then the third night, we played with the full lights and the spotlights at 11 o'clock, and it was like the showcase spot, and that was providential.
The record companies, Capital, quick to get in, weren't they, and get the product moving. You had singles released. Time Machine was out within weeks. They were very quick to jump onto the building popularity of this band.
Yes, for our career to start in such a chance, it was like, boy, all of us couldn't really believe that this was happening. It's like, pinch me, man. Is this really going on? It was so fast. And Terry Knight, God rest his soul, he was a good promoter, and he had the gift of gab, and he signed us to a production deal to himself, and he was signed to Capitol Records. So we had no idea what kind of money that was or what it could have potentially been, except for the fact that he told us that we were getting a larger percentage than the Beatles. And we felt, wow, that's good enough for us. But, 20-year-old kids, we didn't even ask questions, didn't know. And for the first year, we were paid like $350 a week. And we were taken advantage of because, we were pretty gullible kids, and we just wanted to go play more music. And because Terry knew that, he just used it and made himself very wealthy before we started getting any kind of money at all.
You had a gold album with the first album, August 25th, 1969, when it came out, got to number 27 on the Billboard charts. You weren't doing any of the interviews either at the time. Everything was being done by Terry Knight, he of the infamous Contract. So he literally was the spokesperson, and everything was being done through him.
Yes, that's right, Tim. And he told us that he was going to keep us from the press to create a mystique around the band, when in actual fact, he was keeping us from the press so that he could tout his managerial abilities and tell the world how great Terry Knight was.
It's incredible to think that people got away with it. And it wasn't unusual either at the time. There are so many stories around the 60s and 70s with this sort of thing happening. But there was one infamous tale. Tell us about how competitive life was on the road with other bands, and what actually happened with Peter Grant and Led Zeppelin. I mean, I know the story about the plugs being pulled, but he was genuinely concerned that there was another band on the bill that might be an equal or potentially better than Led Zeppelin.
Well, we played the night before in Cleveland, and Cleveland Auditorium, and got a great reaction from the crowd. I mean, they just loved us in Cleveland because we had been to Cleveland before as the Pack, and now we're there as Grand Funk Railroad. So they knew the faces, but they had never seen us in this capacity before. So then we go on the following night to Olympia Stadium in Detroit, and this is a hometown crowd. They just loved us, and this was the first time that we had played as Grand Funk Railroad, and we kind of kept ourselves out of Michigan just so that we would get away from the nightclub act reputation that we had. I mean, we were playing festivals and the jock hops back then. The disc jockeys from the radio stations would have these hops, and we'd go play those. But that's the only place that we had been, and the only kind of notoriety that we had was just from those small gigs. And now we come back as Grand Funk Railroad, and the people loved it. The people were going nuts. We were just about to go into Inside Looking Out, which is the song that really brought the audience forward. And if they were still sitting in their seats, this song would bring them out of their seats, guaranteed every time. And at that moment, we start to go into it. The electricity was turned off to the amplifiers. The show stops, except for Brewer. He's back there pounding the drums, and I turn around. I'm going, I can't hear it myself. And he stops and looks around, and then Terry Knight comes walking out onto the stage, and he takes the microphone and he says, "Due to contractual obligation, Grand Funk Railroad has to leave the stage now." And the audience went, boo! They start throwing wine bottles and beer bottles and whiskey bottles start hitting the stage. And I'm going, oh my God, I didn't know that people had this stuff with them. But they didn't like it that we were being yanked at that point. And it was an hour and a half later before Zeppelin took the stage, and by that time, at least half the audience had left the auditorium. So Mel Shocker, the bass player, and I, we went out and got a good seat right in the middle of the auditorium, just behind the crowd, and watched Zeppelin, and loved it, by the way. I mean, with Page doing that, the thing, playing his guitar with a bow from a cello or something. It was very entertaining, and I loved watching them.
You're doing tours, you're doing albums. What do you remember about that great publicity stunt for the second album, when you literally took up a block almost on Times Square for the album cover of Closer to Home, at what was huge cost, 50 grand a month? You were on there for 2 months, and there was a strike, wasn't there, by the billboard workers? You got a couple of extra.
Yes, we got extra months. We got like 3 extra months out of it and didn't have to pay a cent. And that definitely aided the sellout show at Shea Stadium for Grand Funk Railroad. I mean, when we went to New York City and walked down to Times Square, Mel Shocker and I, we look up and there's our faces. And I look over at Mel, I says, "Well, what do you think about that, buddy?" And he looks over at me and he says, "This is unfreaking believable, dude." He says, "This is unbelievable." Yeah, and still to this day, that was a gift. I'm thinking, my God, that would have cost a lot of extra cash to have it up there, and we had no intention of paying any more money. I mean, it was already costing us a lot of money to be there, and now the billboard workers go on strike, and the rest is history.
That landmark moment when you sell out the Shea Stadium quicker than the Beatles, 72 hours to do the whole stadium. I mean, did you think initially when you were booked to play there that you would sell out the stadium?
Sid Bernstein was the promoter for that, and we had done some shows for Sid previously, and he really loved the band. So we know going up front that we got a guy that likes us, and that the chances, the potential for a good crowd is definitely there. But then when Terry Knight brought the news to the band that the thing had sold out, in 72 hours, wow, man, it's like me being the songwriter, I was very, very excited that the people loved us that much that they camped out on the lawn of Shea Stadium in their tents and sleeping bags and what have you, to be the first ones at the ticket office to buy tickets. And that was the only place. This was prior to any online sales. There was no such thing as online sales in 71 there. I don't think online sales started, Ticketmaster, I think started in 72, but it was quite a feat for everyone to go to the ticket office at Shea Stadium, all 55,000 people, and buy a ticket. And that really, man, like I said, for me, because I wrote the songs and the people were coming to hear my songs, this is my heart. I'm pouring my heart out. And that night at Shea Stadium, it was just very spiritual. And when we took the stage, we had no monitors. Back then you played with just the front of house, but it was better than what the Beatles had. All they had was the in stadium speaker system, and they couldn't hear anything. But we could hear the front of house because we had custom audio electronics, Jim Fackert's PA system up there, and it was rocking. And Humble Pie had just got off stage, and Humble Pie, that was with Frampton,
Stevie Marriott.
That band was a hot band, and they opened our European tour that we had just finished, and we said, man, we need to bring these guys back to the United States and have them open for us there because they are a rockin' band, and I love those guys. I mean, Marriott and I, after we would play a gig in Europe when we were doing our tour, we'd go to the pub and have a few beers, and then it wasn't long before he was singing to me and I was singing to him across the table from each other, and we were always drawing a crowd around us. But it was just a great time because they were a great bunch of guys, and I was happy to have them there and happy that they had warmed that crowd up.
How did it get for you on that first trip to Europe? What were your expectations of the fans? And I mean, music was very different then because in Europe, it used to take months and months for new albums to get over, and radio stations were very, very backward over here. It wasn't anything like the US. So what was your reception like when you came over to Europe?
Well, the reception was fantastic. In fact, we played a free concert in Hyde Park, and that was with Humble Pie, and there was 65,000 people in Hyde Park, and that word went out almost instantaneously, and we played Royal Albert Hall, and they loved us there. And every place that we went, people were just ready for us. It was like, man, the word got out quick.
That show, by the way, at Shea Stadium, recorded, never released. How is that possible that has stayed in somebody's cupboard for knocking on 50 years?
I think because the band owns that. It's really not the band that owns it. It's the corporation, GFR Enterprises, Ltd., owns that tape. And because the other two guys in Grand Funk have gone out and they hired three other guys to take my place, and they go out as Grand Funk. And I wrote 92% of the music. And if you've ever seen any of the early on recordings, the video recordings, I am definitely the front man for the original Grand Funk Railroad. But those guys are trying to promote a different Grand Funk Railroad now, and I call it the faux funk, F-A-U-X, because really I have compelled them many times over the past 23 years to give the fans what neither one of us can give them separated. Let's put the band back together and bury the hatchet and go out and do the Grand Funk Railroad the way it's supposed to be done. But there's such bitterness and such hatred there, and it's just dishonest to have gone and presented yourself as Grand Funk Railroad when you're the bass player and the drummer, and you're excluding the front man. It's just if they would have said Grand Funk Railroad Revisited or something to this effect to give the fans a head up, but they didn't do that, and shame on them.
It's 50 years ago, actually, yesterday, November the 15th, that Pluribus Funk was released. The critics, as ever, didn't like it, but I saw a great piece written by a critic in, I think it was Rolling Stone, who said on the re-release, the remastered version when it came out in 2003, is that for a time Grand Funk Railroad were the people's choice, and the people were right. I thought that was a great line.
Yeah, I like that line.
Now, you fired Terry Knight, eventually brought in Todd Rundgren to produce, who was a real hotshot young producer at the time, worked with Badfinger and the New York Dolls, as well as Zenat. But were you looking for a new direction to take the band in when you brought him in?
As a matter of fact, yes, because the sound that we were getting on early albums was not quite up to our expectations, Tim. And we looked forward to working with Todd Rundgren because of just his reputation, of course, and listening to the music that he produced and thinking, wow, we are really going to have a guitar that sounds like my guitar does on stage. The drums will be big and the bass will be massive. Well, the bass was always massive, but it was kind of taking over everything in the Terry Knight mixes. But with Todd Rundgren, we respected him, and we were anticipating working with him. But the way he got picked, the way we picked him, was we had names in a hat, and we reached in there and picked out that name, and there he was. And Lynn Goldsmith, who was our publicist at the time, had a relationship with Todd Rundgren, and she was so excited that I picked that name from the hat, and with her help, because she was the mastermind behind all the album covers, and she did a lot of. In fact, she was the one who told the band, why don't you guys do a song that is about you, that you're an American band. So then Brewer comes to rehearsal the following day with the lyrics to American Band, and I had the guitar parts in my head as he was singing it. I said, well, what about this? And then I played, and he was going, oh yeah, man, look, we do that. But at the end of the session, when we did record American Band, Brewer came to me and said, Mark, I've never had 100% right credit. Can I take this 100% right credit on this song? And I said, go ahead, Don, because I'm a nice guy, Tim. And and I was just doing it out of my heart. And that didn't change me from being a nice guy. It just made me aware of people would take advantage of that.
Whose idea was it to bring in and use perhaps the most famous cowbell in rock music?
Well, that is my idea because I said to Brewer, man, we need a cowbell on this song. And he says, well, I don't have one. I said, dude, we got to have a cowbell on this song. I said, just think of the songs that do have cowbells and that are very big. I said, this could be it. He says, okay, I'll stop and pick one up tomorrow on the way to rehearsal. I said, no, man, pick up 6 cowbells and we will get the one that matches in tone to the key of this song, which is in D, the key of D, A440. And so he picked up 6 cowbells on the way to rehearsal, and we matched the one with a little duct tape on it and made it sound like, a huge cowbell. I don't like a cowbell that just goes tink, tink, tink. This one, man, it was going kank, kank, kank. Yeah, it was spitting it out.
The lyrics as well were great, all about what was going on the road, including the infamous line about the 4 Chiquitas in Omaha.
Oh, yes, and that was a true line. But tearing down the hotel wasn't. And, there's a lot of fantasy in there. But Freddie King, being out with Freddie King and playing poker, after every show, when Freddie King was opening for us, after every show, we were playing poker with Freddie King. And one night, Freddie, he was kind of losing some hands, and usually he was winning all the time. We're thinking, how is this guy winning so much? And then finally, he slams a Saturday night special down on the table, and he says, well, things better change. And we said, are you kidding me, man? There's a 38 special laying on the table. Things are really going to change. It was a lot of fun.
Did you ever think that it was going to end? I mean, you had a couple of albums with Todd Rundgren. You had Jimmy Einar in as well, who was went on to become an absolute legend. Frank Zappa for good singing coming in there as well. I mean, did you ever think, well, this will just drop off a cliff?
No. I thought, when it happens, it'll happen. And I think Born to Die kind of was the last stroke. And people say, well, that was supposed to be. I guess, you wrote this song. But the song, Born to Die, was about my cousin who had died in a motorcycle crash. He was in the sidecar of a bike that they built, and him and his friend, and they were all going out to the Holly Hotel, and they were a bunch of bikers, on the road, and they hit this curve, and the guy was going too fast and couldn't negotiate this curve, and that my cousin was in that sidecar, broke his neck when it rolled over and killed him instantly. And so I wrote that song, but it was not to forecast the eventuality that occurred.
And from then on, of course, we know the history, but outside of Grand Trunk Railroad, of course, and the various incarnations since, I mean, you've been incredibly busy over the years, and there have been some great projects you've been involved with, in particular, Ringo's All-Stars and the All-Star Band with Randy Bachman and Billy Preston, John Entwistle and Zach Starkey. How much did you enjoy that when that came about?
It was really one of the heights of my career personally, to be able to play music with people that I respected and admired. I mean, forget about it. Billy Preston, he's a virtuoso, and he used to open shows for Grand Funk Railroad on his own with his band, the Billy Preston Band, and I always enjoyed watching him, and just knowing that he was in the band, that had me, just jacked right up. And then becoming friends with John Entwistle, and for him to walk over to me and say, Mark, in Closer to Home, I'm hearing something like this. And he starts playing with harmonics in there. He says, what do you think about me doing that? And I said, John, I think it is absolutely romantic, dude. You need to do that, because it gave me the chills that hear this guy, Entwistle, that I had loved for so many years and loved his bass playing, is showing me a part that he's hearing for my song. I'm going, oh my God, yes, let's do that. And getting to know Randy Bachman from BTO, what a great guy. And of course, Felix Cavalieri, man, his voice and his playing abilities on the B3. And Zach Starkey, forget about it. Just talk about somebody locking it down. Man, he was slamming it out. And Mark Rivera was the pickup guy who played saxophone, guitar, he played some percussion, but he sang very well. And that whole group, the whole experience was exciting to me. It was one of the most exciting times of my career.
I did like the tale about Ringo turning around to John Entwistle and saying, listen, you got to turn that bass down, man. It is way too loud. But going on, I mean, you're still working very hard. You're out on tour. You've been down to Chile. You had a great time down there. You brought out From Chile with Love, the DVD. You had a great time in Santiago.
Yes, in Chile, some of the fans had made it to a gig we did in Las Vegas, and they were telling us about, all the Chilean fans. And when the first time we got there, I didn't realize how many fans there were and how over the top they were. It's like we were the Beatles now in South America. I mean, that was great. And I thought, man, when we had the opportunity to record a DVD, I jumped on it because the guy said he was going to give us a deal. And I'm all ears when it comes to somebody saying they're going to give us a deal. I'm into deals. And not only just for, the monetary savings on getting this off the ground, because he believed in us enough to put it on the line. He says, I will come in there and do it, and we'll get part of the sales as they occur. And I'm thinking, man, this guy's got a lot of faith. And so we recorded Mark Farner's American Band from Chile with Love in Santiago, where there's now 16 live tracks. There were 18, Tim, but someone protested and said they wanted American Band taken off and Shining On taken off this CD. But we reluctantly did pull them, but it was at the last minute, and the whole thing had to go back into, to redo the what they do. I don't even know the terminology, but they had to redo the whole thing, and now we've released it, and it's got the 16 live tracks. It's got 5 bonus audio tracks and 2 bonus videos. And from the $14.99 that it sells for, my wife Lisa and I take $3 from every DVD and we give it to Veterans Support Foundation here in the U.S. These people are veterans that are helping veterans. They don't take one penny. There is nothing that they take from it for their own personal time that they put in, because they donate it. And these brothers and sisters are real, and they know what it's like to return to their country from a foreign land, and they're making it a lot easier for our veterans here, who some of them, they are stricken when they come back. Some of them don't have legs. Some of them don't have arms. And some of them need to go before the Department of Veterans Affairs. And so they have somebody who will advocate for them, and somebody that knows the strings And we love these guys because they are real, they are honest, and they're hands-on. There's no government red tape, no bullshit involved. It's just our brothers and sisters helping our brothers and sisters. So I'm very proud to be able to do that and to turn the people on to what it's like for an American band to play in Santiago, Chile.
Last question. We've seen down the years bands at loggerheads. I mean, the Eagles had to wait until hell froze over, but it eventually did, and they got back together. Guns N' Roses, I mean, nobody ever thought they would ever get back together. Page and Plant even got Zeppelin back together for one night. What is the potential of getting the original members, because all the original members are still there, back together, even for just a couple of shows? Do you think it could happen?
Well, I have for 23 years been trying to get those guys to go back out as the band, as the real, actual, the original Grand Funk Railroad. But because of the way it went down and because of the skullduggery that has been against me, and I'm not holding anything, because I have to learn, to forgive, because if you don't forgive, then all that shit is eating your lunch, and it's, you think about it every day, until I got to the point where I said, I just can't let this bother me. That then I could go on and play music, and I just feel sorry for the fans, and I have, because every time somebody says to me, Mark, we just read an article where Don Brewer says when they ask him, would the band ever get back together again, he says, never say never. Well, it's been never say never for 23 years, so I really don't think it's going to happen. I have been in it myself. I mean, I have been into doing it, but I'm getting to the point where I really don't think it's going to happen, because, that's the way it is.
Such a shame, such a shame. But these things do have a habit of one day something or somebody or an occasion or a moment in history happens, and people think, look, just for one more time, we're too old for all this shit. To coin a phrase from Lethal Weapon, I'm too old for this shit. Let's just get back on the road and remind ourselves how good we were.
Amen. Well, I appreciate it, Brother Tim. It's been great to talk to you. I appreciate your knowledge and your love for rock and roll. I know that you're part of our family. So keep rocking, brother, and knock 'em alive.